Okay, let's run.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it.
It's a quest. It's a quest for fun.
Well, The Rock says, why don't we just cut right to the chase?
Okay, now he wants to get together. Well, he wants to talk.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
It's showtime, folks!
What are you?
I'm...
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to And I Quote, the weekly show where we introduce you to content creators of all shapes and sizes that join us from any and all corners of the nerd universe. We find out more about them by taking your questions. I am your host, Ryan of Nerd Culture, and our guest on this episode is indie comic writer and creator of Thorny Comics, and also of a hit story series, I should say, or comic book series, I should probably say even better. My words are being messy. Called Cicada Samurai. Didn't see that one coming, but we're going to talk more about that later. Please welcome Jerry Carita. Jerry, welcome in, my good friend. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. It's we're grateful to have you here. Now, if you have any questions for Jerry as we go throughout the course of this episode, please let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. Our producers are going to be monitoring it as we go throughout the course of this episode. And if you're joining this live or on the replay, thank you for being with us. And don't forget to like and share this with everyone you know. In the meantime, Jerry, when were you introduced to the world of comics?
So I think a lot of people have that story where they were like a kid and then a friend handed them a comic for the first time and they remember the moment. And I never really had that. I was into, as a kid, my geek thing was always TV shows and sci-fi and the X-Files and Star Trek: The Next Generation. Those were my jam as a kid. It wasn't until I was I think I was just over 30 years old. I'm a reality TV producer by trade before getting into comics, and I was working on a little show called Comic Book Men. And on that set, just the energy and the love for the stories that Kevin and all of his friends had, Walt Flanagan, Brian Johnson, Ming Chen, Mike Zapsik, it was just infectious. And so while we were hanging out in that shop for those few months, I just started reading comics. The first comic book series I ever read was The Walking Dead. And that was my introduction to the whole genre, the whole medium of comics storytelling was The Walking Dead. And then I worked back from there. I picked the movies that I really liked, that I had loved, the X-Men movies and the Spider-Man movies. And I went back and I read all of Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men, because that's where all the movies came from. All those stories came right out of that man's, right out of his head. And I worked backwards from there, and I started reading, all the I got really into Batman for a little while. But that was sort of my first foray into it was on the set of Comic Book Men.
That is some incredible stuff. Man, my goodness, you mentioned some big names, some really good titles there. Any other names that come to mind when it comes to some of your favorite comic book writers or artists, past or present?
Oh yeah, I really like. I read a lot of indie ones now, and a lot of them are from Kickstarter, and they're kind of not available in stores as much. But I really like everything Pat Shand writes. I like everything Justin Gray writes. He's actually a friend now. He and I we worked on a Kickstarter campaign together, and I work with a publisher that he works with. He's great. And I love he does a book called Hope right now, which is really amazing. It's on Kickstarter and available on his website. And then really big ones, Scott Snyder. I'm in his writing workshop, so I read everything he writes. James Tynan, full disclosure, James is my cousin. And so I read everything that he writes. And actually he started his writing career around the same time I started reading comics. So it was kind of that's why I got into Batman for a while, because he was in the Bat universe for a few years there. But those are my kind of writing titans that I really like reading.
Batman. Nothing wrong with Batman. There's plenty of comics. There's plenty of comic runs to choose from. You mentioned, was it Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo with Court of Owls?
Yeah. He talks about that a lot in his thing, because the whole New 52. I know that in retrospect, a lot of people are really mad at the New 52 for various reasons. People just don't like reboots; they want to start it over. But it was a perfect timing for me, because that's when I was starting to. The whole point was to bring on new people, and I was one of them. So I really enjoyed, and especially Batman. Scott. I think other people doing other characters in the New 52 kind of went a little bit further afield from the base of who their characters were. You know, Superman got a little bit more of a makeover than Batman did. Batman basically just, you know, got a little bit younger to start. I think he became like a 28-year-old instead of a 30-something-year-old. And otherwise, Batman was Batman, and you know, he just wrote his version of those stories, and I really loved it. I really loved all of it. You know, it's a great, as like a TV producer, I always wanted to do scripted television. I've done a lot of unscripted, a lot of reality TV. And you know, no one is going to give an unknown, you know, wife swap director $300 million to do like a, you know, space opera thing. So, you know, when I started reading comics, I was like, this is amazing because you can tell these great stories and you don't have to be like saddled with a budget and things like that. So I just fell in love with it, man. And just, I started a few years ago working with my friends at Blue Juice Comics as a editor and publisher, and now I'm doing my own. I'm writing my own stuff.
Congratulations on all that, by the way. You know, it's funny, somewhat follow up to that with Batman. I started reading comics 7 years ago. Believe it or not, it was on Batman Day of all days.
Oh, wow.
At my local comic shop. My friends finally seduced me into going to this weird magical place called a comic book store. And we went to one where I was living originally. This is back when I was living up north in the state of Maryland, for those of you keeping track of the geography of the store at home. We went to this place, and it was during the Rebirth line of DC. DC was coming out with Rebirth, right? So Tom King wrote some of the Batman story, a lot of the Batman stories actually, and I read that and I thought, wow, this is some good artwork and this is some good writing too. If this is what, you know, if this is what comic books, you know, can be and what they are, or if this is what, you know, some of the stuff they're going to be introducing us to with these kind of stories moving forward, I'm all for it, right? So then I just went to town and pick, you know, I pick and choose which stories I wanted to read, and I, you know, brought them home. I read them, and that's, you know, in a way, the rest is history. So
yeah. Batman Day moves every year, doesn't it? Does it move each year, or is it like Thanksgiving? No, it's not, because I think the first one was like in July, but it moves.
Yeah, but more recently in the last number of years, for those of you wondering what we're discussing specifically, local comic shops throw a day every year called Batman Day, not just Free Comic Book Day, which I believe is the first weekend in May. But Batman Day has normally been held in September of every year.
Yeah.
So for me, it's been in the fall of the year. So if you go to your local comic shops in the midway part through September of, you know, each respective year, definitely check your local listings because it may be different for some other areas of the country. But yeah, it's always in September for me. I don't know how it goes for you, but
I mean, it's not. I don't think it's different in New York than it is where you are. But Batman Day is Batman Day. But I think the first one, I looked it up as soon as you said it because I wanted to know if I could wish you a happy anniversary. But
thank you. Thank you. It's not really my birthday, but your anniversary for Batman Day, because Batman Day was back in mid-September. But you know,
right. Well, the first one was in July of 2014. So for whatever reason they moved it back a few months after that, and then they left it in September. But there you go.
Wow. Okay. Wow. We just learned some
belated anniversary.
We just got some history lessons here. Thank you, Jerry. And yes, thank you for wishing me, I guess, a happy anniversary on reading comics for 7 years. No one's ever wished me happy anniversary. We're so happy for you. We're proud of you. Well, thank you. I haven't done anything yet, but thanks. I haven't really accomplished anything yet in my life, but, you know, I'm trying. I'm trying. And once again, for those of you wondering what the Bantha fodder is going on, this is a new episode of And I Quote with the incredible Jerry Carita of Cicada Samurai, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. But don't forget to like and share this with everyone you know. If you have any questions for our good friend Jerry, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. If you want to wish me a happy belated anniversary on reading comics for the last 7 years or so, hey, I'm not going to, I'm fine with it. It's not a big deal, But you mentioned a few names a moment ago in terms of certain pieces of media. What are some of your favorite comic book based movies or TV series, past or present? Anything else stand out?
I mean, I was already watching The Walking Dead when I started reading the comic, and so that that's been an influential one on me, if not always one of my favorites. I think that show went on for a very long time, and in comics, I think you can do that. In TV shows, it's a little harder for various reasons. But I still really love those characters. I loved, going way back, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. I think X2 is one of my favorite movies, period. The original Superman movie. which I love. I love watching the first one and the Christopher Reeves movies. I love watching the first one and the second one together because they were partially filmed together. And then at some point Gene Hackman didn't like the new director, and so he stopped showing up. So sometimes if you watch the second one, in the background Lex Luthor is not Gene Hackman, it's someone else with a weird wig on. It's very funny if you go back and watch it. Yeah. But those are, those were always very big for me. Like those movies were great. I'm trying to think of other ones where I'm trying to think of TV shows, because the problem now is there's so, like, everything was a comic 20 years ago, everything. So it's hard to, like Stranger Things feels like it was a comic. I really enjoyed Paper Girls, and I'm mad that they canceled it, but yeah, those are just some of the ones I've really enjoyed over the years. The X-Men movies were like some of the first ones that I really was into. Those were those older X-Men movies.
No, some good titles there for sure. And X-Men, obviously, we were discussing that on another video we did. And when you can find that video on our YouTube channel, at Nerd Culture Channel, we're doing a new series called The Meaning of Fandom, and we're asking our roundtable of special guests that are going to be joining us during those episodes what a specific fandom or character, what it means to them, and why. And the one that I picked, one of the first ones I picked, was X-Men.
Yeah.
So good. It's a good pick.
It's such a good series. And like, what's nice again about having gone back and read the whole Claremont run is he wrote that book for so long that basically the characters aged. And that's a thing that doesn't really comics. You don't really get. You get Old Man Wolverine now, and you get Old Man Logan, and you get like multiple versions of Wolverine who are at different ages. But in TV, in movies, it's been so long. It takes so long to make a movie that it's actually nice that you have these great stories from when they're all older and these great stories from when they're younger. So you can kind of live with these characters across all those stories, even in the movies. Yeah. But X-Men was a very big one for me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. My favorite X-Men movie is, not counting the spin-offs that they've done, whether it's, the Logan movies, the Depp, whatever, just all that, separate that for a minute. Days of Future Past is my favorite movie. To me, it's the best live action X-Men movie we've ever gotten, and probably ever will get. I don't know what the MCU plans on doing with it, but I just don't really care, because it's hard to, listen, you can recast these characters as many times as you want, because the characters are bigger than the actor. The torch is always going to be passed. How many Supermen have we had in the last 40 years? We've had 6, 7 of them. How many Batmans have we had? Like 12, like 10. It's ridiculous. We've had a lot, right? But whatever the MCU is planning, it's not going to. Nothing's going to hold a candle to Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender. Any of those other some of them were young and up and coming actors at one point. Don't get me wrong, but
Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence is like,
she was young.
Yeah, she was very young when she first came on board those films. I think, I'm always excited for what a new group of people are going to do with something, because I think towards the end of the X-Men movies, that creative team was kind of running out of. Yeah, so it's nice, and that's what's nice about comics, is that the creative team changes, the characters stay the same, and you kind of get a new person's perspective on the universe. And so I'm hoping that with the shift in the MCU, that when they bring in the X-Men, the mutants, and all that stuff, and they kind of unite it all, that it actually does come out, and like they come up with something that's interesting and kind of revives my love of those characters, even if it's not the same people playing them. I remember when the first time when it was like Hugh Jackman, I feel like the comic book fans who loved that character, when they first said that Hugh Jackman was cast as Wolverine, the main thing I remember, and this is like, when did that movie come out? In the late mid-90s?
The first X-Men movie was in the year 2000.
So 2000. So the internet was a thing, but it was a lot of just message boards. It wasn't like what it is now. But I still, even then, remember that comic book fans were angry that Hugh Jackman was too tall. That was like the main thing people were pissed about, because Wolverine's like 4'10" or whatever, 5'2" or whatever he's supposed to be in the comics. He's supposed to be short and stocky and muscular and powerful. And Hugh Jackman is like 6'2" or 6'3". He's huge. And people were so angry about it. And now I can't imagine someone else playing the role, but I'm still excited to see what they do with it, because you never know, because I've liked different Batmans. I loved the Tim Burton Batman movie was my first that was really my first Batman, but I love Christian Bale as Batman. I didn't hate Ben Affleck the way people did as Batman. Um, so you get different ones. Christopher Reeves was my Superman. But I like the guy. I don't know his name, but I like the actor who plays him on TV too. It's a totally different take on the character.
You're thinking of Tyler Hoechlin, and then the one who played him in the movies after who was it? Christopher Reeve. I mean, obviously there was Brandon Routh. He did a solo movie, and then it was Henry Cavill, who, by the way, Henry Cavill's my boy. He's my super loop. No disrespect to Christopher Reeve at all. I am not disrespecting him and anything that he did in those films at all. But for me, Henry Cavill just hits me right here. Like I just love that movie, Man of Steel. I'm talking about Man of Steel. The other stuff that happened within the DC Cinematic Universe, there was a lot of creative differences. Obviously, Zack Snyder was dealing with a family tragedy at one point, and there was a lot of behind the scenes issues, and the executives were just, there were too many cooks in the kitchen, bottom line. Way too many cooks. Too many cooks in the kitchen trying to figure out, where do we ride the ship? Where is this going to go? Zack had a plan, and the executives didn't like it. A lot of the fans didn't like it, but Zack, I mean, look, I would have liked to have seen the whole roadmap. Unfortunately, we're never going to get it, but hey, I'm a Zack Snyder defender to a degree, because I would have liked to have seen the cinematic universe to what it overall was going to be if we had gotten it hypothetically. But then again, we have a new reign with James Gunn. Peter Safran are taking over the reins. Let's see what they can do. Let's see what this new Superman movie is going to be like, because they cast their new Superman. They've cast their new Lois Lane. They've cast Green Lantern. They've cast a few other big name characters and actors in there. So you know what? Let's see what happens first. I'm not expecting much, because I'm not really a big James Gunn fan, because I'm a Henry Cavill defender and always have and always will be. Henry, you're my boy. But let's see what happens.
I think Henry, I thought he was a great Superman. The overall vision that Zack had for all those films didn't connect with me the way that I kind of wanted it to. And I think that was true for some people. And for some people, they will go to their grave saying that Zack Snyder's version of all these characters was the best ever in cinema. People feel very passionately about whatever they like and don't like, and I would acknowledge absolutely that he had a very clear vision for what he wanted to do, and that he didn't get to complete it. So it's hard to judge. It's hard to look at it and say, did I like it or not? But I didn't always love the feel of those movies the way that I did instantly with the X-Men and when the Marvel Cinematic Universe started building on itself. The first couple movies were a little goofy. Like sometimes I was watching Iron Man recently, actually, with my son. We did all the Star Wars movies all the way through. He's 7.
Ooh, excellent. Star Wars. All right.
We did all of those, and now he's like, let's do the Marvel movies now. And I was like, that's so many movies. It's so, that's the world
dude, that's a black hole. That's like 45 movies you and your boy are gonna have to watch.
And like with Star Wars, we did the movies, and then I messed this up. I said to him, there are TV shows that take place in between some of these movies, and now he's like, we have to watch all of those. So now I'm trapped. I'm never gonna get out of Star, because they're making more of them too. I'm never gonna get out of Star Wars world.
In the words of our good friend Admiral Akbar, it's a trap.
It's a trap, and I walked right into it. And so with the Marvel movies, there's also like an infinite bunch of TV shows now that go in between all those movies and stuff. So, the point was, I just rewatched Iron Man, and it's kind of amazing how later in the MCU, all the movies kind of started to feel a little bit the same, But early on, they were very different. Like Iron Man was such a weird movie, and it's like everyone else is in a superhero movie, and Robert Downey Jr. is like improvising some scenes, and
it's like his character in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Yes, he's just kind of messing around a little bit, and it works, it works, but it's like it's a little weird, like watching it, and then because later there was less of that, they all kind of started to feel like Avengers movies. Instead of like Thor was a fantasy epic and Captain America was like a World War II movie, like an old school movie. They all had such different feels, and they all kind of came together. But yeah, anyway.
Wow, you're walking into that's a huge trap of watching 45 movies with your boy. That's Oh boy, definitely. I mean, I can't comment on some of the more recent pieces of MCU media because I haven't seen many of the shows. I haven't seen a lot of the more recent, I should say, movies that have come out because I know a lot of. Now, granted, I'm not letting the response for them critically or audience-wise, get in the way of me wanting to sit down and watch them per se. But the reviews have not been stellar. The tank is running on empty in certain cases. And I think, and I brought this up a couple of weeks ago with some friends of mine here on Neuroculture Channel. For those of you just joining us, this is And I Quote with our special guest on this episode, Jerry Carita. And if you have any questions for Jerry, by all means, let us know in the comments, let us know in the chat. And don't forget to like and share this with everyone you know. I feel like there's a lot of superhero fatigue that's setting in because Marvel is bombarding us with so much now that I can't even keep up with what the heck is going on. I don't know who's doing what side is who person on. And the other studios are coming out with their respective properties as well. You got DC trying to reboot everything, and granted, they're going to take time because the new era hasn't quote unquote started yet, because the latter films are coming out with Blue Beetle, and you had The Flash, and you also have, what's the other one? Aquaman 2 and the Lost Kingdom is coming out later this year. I think it's coming out at Christmas time, if I remember correctly, or maybe next year. No, those things have been delayed because of the SAG/writer strikes. But do you feel there is superhero media fatigue to a degree? And from your standpoint, how do you feel about that?
I mean, it's really hard to tell because there's so many other things that, like, no movie is doing particularly well. Like Barbie surprised everybody, but and that there's no kind of, I don't think anybody really expected that, but like unless you have Tom Cruise doing a Maverick reboot, like it's hard to know that you're going to have a hit, and so the pandemic kind of changed the pandemic changed so much about the business of how movies and TV are both made, and it did it at like a fine time if you had just finished the MCU, the Thanos saga of the MCU, because then those were the two biggest movies in the whole thing, and it was like brought everyone together. It put a button on that story, and then there was a pandemic, and the world shut down, and people stopped going to the movies right when Marvel started trying to have their TV shows plant the seeds for new movies that people just kind of were like, I'll just wait for the thing to come. I'll watch it on my TV at home, because everyone got used to that now. And streaming kind of swallowed the movie business. It swallowed Blockbuster, and then it swallowed TV, and now it's swallowing the movie business. So it's hard to really judge. I mean, there's so many DC things that we're never going to see just because of a merger between two companies and a new realignment of what's worth it to spend money on, and we're never going to see the Batgirl movie. That's like ludicrous. They almost finished it, and like, because they said it's probably not going to make back its money in theaters. Okay, that's fair. But you own like multiple platforms that you could put it out on, and there are people who would be interested. You could convert it to a pilot and make it like one of the Flash universe TV shows. There's a million things you could do that would bring that to light in a way that made sense, but they have to look at their numbers and decide, it doesn't make sense to do, so we're not going to do it, and that's it. And that's a business bottom line that they don't care what we think. It's like they're not going to make back their money. They're not going to do it. So it's hard to say that like there are a lot of superhero movies. There's a lot of superhero content out there. Some of it's doing just fine. I think some of the stuff on TV is doing really well. I know a lot of people are psyched for Loki too. I personally, I think WandaVision is one of my favorite TV shows over the last like 5 years. And it's such a weird show, but it's like they took a risk with that. They took a little bit of some risks with Loki. They took risks with these shows to make them a little weirder. And it's kind of what I love about comics, is you can tell, when you pick up House of M, you don't know what you're reading for the first few pages. You're like, why are these characters that I know and love playing different characters? You don't have no idea what's going on. And they let that feeling kind of sink in and be weird for a little while. And that's what I love about comics. And so I feel like the Marvel TV shows have done that a little bit. They've kind of gone out of their way as much as they could to give you that weird, like, what is this thing that I'm watching? Why does it feel like it doesn't feel like a Thanos, Avengers movie. It doesn't feel like a superhero thing necessarily right off the bat. It's like a psychological drama. And I like that. I love that. So is there superhero fatigue? Maybe. It's hard to tell a superhero story over and over again. A lot of their origin stories kind of have similar elements. It's very hard to kind of differentiate them. It's hard to get away from that thing. Like when Doctor Strange came out, I remember a lot of people saying, okay, so he's just Iron Man with magic instead of technology, like, because he had a goatee, you know what I mean? Like, that's all it took. It's for people to be like, don't need it, you know? So is there superhero fatigue? Maybe. I think there's not comic book fatigue though, because there's still so many new shows coming out are still based on comics, if not directly superheroes.
That's very true. That's very true. And you bring up some very good points there. And thank you for sharing that with us. And going back to real quick, X-Men for just a moment. House of M is a good story. If everyone wants to read more about the X-Men history, House of M is a good trade paperback. Also, another one that stands out to me, and you mentioned Claremont, X-Men God Loves, Man Kills. Fantastic.
Oh yeah. I mean, honestly, everything Claremont wrote is like it's like if anyone wasn't aware of it, all of the Wolverine, all of the Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart X-Men movies are all lifted directly out of Claremont. Did the Dark Phoenix saga. Claremont did Days of Future Past. Sorry, I couldn't. My head mixed around it. But all those things are his stories. He like invented Wolverine's backstory as we know it. You know, that whole thing in the woods and stuff in the Pacific Northwest. So like, you know, yeah, those are great, and those are still stories that they're going to start remining all of that material now again in the MCU. So I don't know, but again, I think Paper Girls was a great show, and I'm sad that it's gone. And that's a comic book.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. A few of my friends are a fan of that property, so it's unfortunate what's happened with that series in terms of it being adapted into a TV series. If anyone's interested in the book, by all means, read the comics, read the books, and visit your local comic shops when you get a chance too. With that being said, when did you decide to become an indie comic book writer?
So I had, yeah, I mean, I've always kind of, ever since I was in school, I would write stories that were like meant for TV or meant for movies. And I still have some of those in my head and laying around, and I'm not converting any of those to a comic book story. But I, like, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I started working with my friends at Blue Juice Comics. They are all mostly producers and TV people who a couple of them worked with me on Comic Book Men. That's how I met them. And they formed their company on the set of Comic Book Men. And so I've read everything they did over the years. And, you know, years later, 2 years ago during the pandemic, everyone had a lot of time in their hands. And I kind of, in my head, I was thinking about getting into this and kind of just seeing what the business was like. And so the first thing I did was work with them for 2 years on the publishing side and the editing side. And, you know, we went to New York Comic Con together. I helped set that up with them. We've done MegaCon for the last couple of years. So I started hitting the convention circuit as part of Blue Juice Comics to just kind of see, you know, how all of that works, what the fandom is like on, you know, boots on the ground. And then what the process is of taking someone's idea and turning it into art and actually then physically turning that into a book, which is not an artistic endeavor. That's very much like a production logistics endeavor. And so I learned all of that first. And then as I was doing it, I just kind of started writing the story. And so it came from two places. One was 2 years ago, there was an enormous emergence of cicadas, which are the little insects that make an unholy racket. Brood X in 2021. Millions of them crawl out of the ground at the same time and just make a huge racket. They live above ground for, I think, 3 weeks, long enough to mate and die, basically. And that was it. So I had this idea about those cicadas in my head. I got obsessed with them. I was listening to podcasts about them. It turns out when European settlers first came here, they don't have cicadas in Europe, so they didn't know what they were. They thought they were locusts, and they thought they were, when they come out of the ground, they break out of a shell after a day or two, and they're bright green with these big red eyes. And the story was that, you know, this is a superstitious bunch of people. So their story was their eyes are red because they've been in the ground staring at the fires of hell. They're demons. And so my first thought was like, what if some of that was true? That could be fun, like demon. So I had this idea about a world where cicadas were characters and they were either monsters or something. And then I just started, when I sat down to write it, it kept striking me as strange. It's so crazy that, like, they live for 17 years underground and then they get 3 weeks in the sunlight and then they drop dead. And I thought, okay, so they're basically teenagers. And I have a 12-year-old son who is more and more starting to spend time outside of where I can keep him safe. So I started thinking, what if there was one cicada who's an adult? There's one adult around, and his job now, like keeping my 3 kids alive, is really hard. It's just like nerve-wracking all the time. What if there was one cicada who had real life experience? He's immortal, and his job is to keep all millions of these teenagers who have 3 weeks to live alive so that the species can continue. It becomes kind of like a dad taking care of his kids, right? So, and then from there, it seemed like one of those jobs in life that was like hopeless. You're going to lose sometimes. You're going to lose some of these kids. You know, there are monsters in the world, and in this book, they're real. So you tell your kids in real life, you know, like you got to be careful. Some people are not. Some people mean you harm. You don't want to scare them to the point where they can't live their lives, but you do have to have them be careful and be prepared. And so I started making this book about that, sort of that feeling that I had that like, how do you tell your kids that there are monsters in the world without just scaring the hell out of them to the point where they can't live a life? In this world, there are monsters in the world that literally just want to rip these cicadas apart for food. They're edible to like birds and badgers and foxes. And there's a thing called a cicada killing a hornet, which is a nightmarish monster of a thing, which I'll tell you what it does in a minute. But like that was the story. So that was where it came from. I kind of took this idea of like a hopeless, a father figure character who is charged with maintaining the safety of a million rowdy teenagers who are all going to prom night on the same night. And that's him brought to his knees by the pressure of all these aggravating teenagers. So when you read the story, the narration of the main character sounds like a dad complaining about his kids. There's some humor to it. You know, it's like it's funny. It's like, these kids are going to be the death of me. If only I could die, you know, that kind of thing.
My goodness, those are some images that are going to keep me up tonight.
Yeah, sorry.
So
it's a lot going on there. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, man, this is what we call heavy. There's that word again, heavy. Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull? Anyway, that's a line from a movie that someone may have watched many times growing up. And maybe they still watch it today. If you know what it is, by all means, let us know what the reference was in the comments or the live chat. Good Lord. Wow, with that dark and disturbing image in my mind out of the way, hopefully for the rest of eternity, what are some of the rewards for you about being an indie comic book writer?
I mean, personally, my kids understand what I do for the first time in my life, which is amazing. Like, as a TV producer, they're like, "What does that mean? Like, do you write it?" I'm like, "No, it's unscripted." So but I do write it sometimes. Like, but you said it's unscripted. And are you the director? No, it's reality TV. They don't call them directors. Are you on the show? Nope. Do you hold the camera? I do not. Are you the editor? Nope, not that either. Like, you know, so like for the first time ever, I'm like, I wrote a comic book, and here it is physically. You can actually read it. And they're like, "Wow, I like this story." Now they're like, "My dad's a comic book maker." So personally rewarding, that's a pretty big one for me. My kids, like, my son is like, wants to be a comic book writer now. He wants to be a comic book writer and artist. He started watching YouTube tutorials and like drawing Ninja Turtles and things like that. He drew this. We're working on a story together called The Grizzly Crew. And he drew this guy for me. He's 7 years old. So that's going to be like what goes on the flag for the Grizzly Crew or something like it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. And so, you know, he's pretty great. And that's pretty great. And I actually just enjoy when you're doing TV. Like I did a season of a show that was basically a scripted series. And I was the head writer and the showrunner. And you write a script, and that script is like the Bible to 90 people. So it's hard to make changes. And it's like a logistical document. It's an instruction manual for how to make the thing that you wrote. What I'm really enjoying about comics writing is it's not that. You're not writing a script from which a props department and a set decoration department and a wardrobe department and the actors and the directors and the lighting department all have to take specific things and then build it separately and bring it all back to make it make sense. I'm writing a document that is for one person. It's for the artist. And if you and your artist have like a shorthand or anything, you can put references in there. You can kind of have an aside where it's like, I kind of want this to feel like something. You can't really do that in a screenplay. You can't do that in a teleplay, you know? So I'm really enjoying that part of it. And other than that, I don't yet have like a downfall of this business story yet, because I'm new. So this is my first comic that I'm writing. It's the first Kickstarter. My plan is to eventually, you know, it has gone pretty well. I've been very lucky. My Kickstarter I hit my goal pretty quickly. So I'm planning to do more issues of this, and my goal is over the next few months I'll have the entire 6-issue run up and running and finished. I'm going to go try and put it in stores, at which point I may come back on your show and tell you I hate this business, comics killed me. But I'm not there yet. So far I've had friends who kind of eased me into it. I have friends and family who've been in the business already, so I kind of knew what I was walking into. And I've been very lucky. So I don't have like a kick in the gut story yet, but we'll see. I assume I will, and I hope it's not a hard kick in the gut.
Gotcha. Well, my newfound friend, you have barely scratched the surface of what you're capable of, and we can't wait to see what happens. By the way, Bush1G says, "Hey, what's up, G?" I'm not sure who that is, but might be a friend of yours. So
I don't know if it is, but now I want to find out.
Bush1G is the username, and they're saying hello in their own special way to you. I suppose, or maybe it's me. I don't know. I mean, they're saying the "What's up, G?" Your name spells with a J, not a G. But hey, maybe it was a, what do you call those things? Autocorrect, fellas. It's called autocorrect. Feel free to look that up on the internet. That'll give you a nice history lesson, so to speak. But thank you for being with us. And for those of you who just joined us, this is And I Quote with Jerry Carita. Don't forget to like and share this with everyone you know. If you have any questions for Jerry, his name starts with the letter J, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. Be more than happy to hear from you. Gee whiz. Man, we've had some good stories here thus far. On the opposite side of the fence, what are some of the biggest challenges about being an indie comic book writer?
I mean, what I've found is a lot of the business is very strange, and it's kind of always morphing. And you have a certain number of people who are really into comic books and are willing to spend money on indie comic books. You have a smaller group of people who are into indie comic books. And so the business is like, what I've learned about the business is that it's very strange. And it's like things like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Zoop, all these crowdfunding platforms make it possible for someone like me to, if I can convince a few dozen people, 100 people, maybe 200 people that I'm writing something that they're interested in, I get to make my comic. And some people don't get that megaphone, don't get to do that. So it's hard to get started. It's hard to get a publisher to take you seriously. There are tons of people writing stuff of various quality levels, and who are pushing really hard or not pushing at all and not knowing why they're not going anywhere. So it's a very strange kind of the challenges are finding an audience and then getting them to want to buy and look at your book. Because there's a ton of competition. There's the big two. There are what I would consider a handful of indie publishers that I don't know why we call them indie publishers anymore. Image is not really an indie. They're huge. I think of indie as, for whatever reason, I think of it as a smaller publisher. Image has a ton of resources at their hands, and the other ones are. So anyway, so it's hard to, as an indie creator, to just find someone to take your thing seriously, to look at it. The model is still, you got to try and get your book in stores, and that's near impossible for an independent person. I've had a couple people ask me about a retailer tier on the Kickstarter campaign, but generally retailers don't really do that. It's never the most popular tier on those campaigns. So I'd say finding the audience is the hardest thing.
Yeah, gotcha, man. Gotcha. It's a big world out there, and we're like the small fish in a very big pond of a lot of different people who do a lot of different things, whether it's indie comic writers and artists, or if it's podcasters. We're a small fish in a big pond, but we're doing our best to entertain you, our incredible audience, whether you're watching or listening to this. We do our best, and Jerry is doing his best. So, hey, support the little guys. Just support the indie folks. With that being said, any pieces of advice you would offer to someone who's aspiring to be an indie comic book creator themselves?
I think that one thing I've learned recently, that there's an old adage that you can't judge a book by its cover. In comic books, you still can't judge the book by its cover, but other people absolutely will judge your book by its cover, and they're not going to pick it up if it doesn't have a cool cover. So as much as you're I'm writing what I think is a great story, you need someone whose vision is aligned with you to work with, to collaborate with. And that person has to, as an artist, has to be able to give you something that you can kind of get someone excited for at first glance. And I've been very lucky there. The people who've done the art for my book, the character designs were done by Takashi Okazaki, who did Afro Samurai back in the day. My main artist is Mary Landro, and she's amazing, and she loves drawing monsters, and she has kind of an anime sensibility, so the book kind of looks a little bit like an anime. I've Walt Flanagan did a cover for me. So I've had like really, really great people work with me, every one of them with a different eye-catching aesthetic, and every one of them has helped me sell books so far. So I think that that's like the advice I would say is find a partner who is talented and whose work catches your eye, because then it'll catch someone else's eye, because comics aren't a visual medium. It's not, people will judge your book by its cover.
Wise pieces of advice. And we, for those of you just watching or listening, we were looking at the cover for what is known as Cicada Samurai. Listen, I've heard of some titles in my day, but this one may top them all. I'm just messing around. But Cicada Samurai, this cover looks phenomenal, and I like the look of this environment and the character. So if you're sitting at a table or you're walking into a place called an elevator, what's your elevator pitch for this whole thing? What are your plans for it?
Well, the elevator pitch is it's a lone samurai cicada a lone cicada who's immortal, imbued with magical samurai powers, whose job is to protect a million of his brood all at the same time. And it's got horror elements, and it's got a lot of heart and a little bit of comedy, but it's very violent. It's very bloody. Like the pages I've been getting from Mary, the monsters in this thing it's in a world that monsters are very real. So these things get devoured and torn apart by animals. It's a lot of violence, but a lot of fun. And the future plans are I have a 6-issue arc planned. I'm working on the script for those now. Mary will be working on the art pretty soon after that. And I'm hoping to, if I can entice a publisher to want to help me publish this traditionally and put it in stores now, I will do that. And if that doesn't move too quickly, I will bring it back to Kickstarter. The Kickstarter community has been like incredibly supportive and amazing so far with this book. I hit my funding goal very quickly, and everyone who's talked to me about what they've seen of the book has said that it looks great. So I'm hoping that when people read it, that the words live up to the artwork, and I'm hoping that people will come back and look for more, either at their local comic shop or back on Kickstarter in a few months.
Excellent. Sounds like a wonderful idea. Any special memories for you from being at conventions or other events, whether you were there as a vendor or there as an attendee?
Oh, well, I loved a few years ago, my first New York Comic Con was a while back, and I brought my son, and watching him see all the guys in cosplay was a lot of fun. My older son is 12 now. He was probably 4 or 5. And what his favorite thing to do was he would judge everyone's cosplay. So he would look at someone and then go, "Hey, Dad, take our picture." Or he would look at someone and go, "You're not Captain America." Mm-mm. "Dad, take our picture." He would still ask for the picture. So that was just a lot of fun. That was a really fun story for me. One other New York Comic Con I was at, I was working. We were doing the pilot for a show called Geeking Out that Kevin Smith was also on. And I had to get Kevin from one side of Comic Con in New York to the other side of the building to interview Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo about Batman. And in San Diego and other big convention centers, they have a lot of like behind the scenes tunnels where you can get from one place to another. I guess for whatever reason at the Javits Center in New York, they didn't have that. So there was no back door way to get Kevin from one side of the building to the other. And this was on like Saturday it was the biggest day of the con. So I looked at Kevin and I was like, "No, let's just skip it. I'm not going to." And he goes, "No, let's just walk right through the floor." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." We got probably 3 steps out of a door before someone was like, "That's Kevin Smith." The first person thought it was a Silent Bob cosplay. And then the next person was like, "No, that's Silent Bob." And then suddenly there were 100 people mobbing us as we walked through. And he's amazing. And what he told everybody was, "I'm happy to take your selfie. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I got to get over there in the next 7 minutes. So you just keep up with me." And he just walked and did his smile thing and did selfies as he walked. And that was pretty amazing to watch. I didn't realize, like, I knew Kevin was famous. I did not understand fully how I can't go to a mall famous like Kevin is. And he said this, I think he's one of like only 2 people who are just real people that other people cosplay as. People cosplay as Stan Lee and they cosplay as Kevin Smith. And otherwise you're playing a character, if you're cosplaying. But anyway, that was a really funny, just kind of like, oh, I had no idea. I had no idea how crazy this would be. But he was super just like, let's just do it. We're just going to walk through. Let's just go. I'm like, all right, great. Let's do it. That was a lot of fun.
Wow. That is something else. That's definitely not working. That's no slouch working at the quick pit stop or the gas and go or whatever it's called. I forget the name of the store in the movie Clerks. I'm sorry, I've seen it a couple times. I can't remember what the name of the convenience store that he works at. But the characters Brian O'Halloran and Jeff Anderson. But anyway, that that is, talk about, my gosh, that is insanity. My question to you is, are you going to NYCC this year?
I'm not going this year. We did it a few years ago with Blue Juice Comics.
Sure.
It's we're actually trying to not hit the same big ones every year. So we did MegaCon 2 years in a row. We skipped it this year. Yeah, that's one in Orlando. A lot of the Blue Juice guys live down in like Melbourne, Florida, like that area. So, or the MegaCon is kind of like their local big convention. So we've done that. We did that 2 years in a row, and you notice kind of a drop off. People will still come over and they'll ask it, unless you have a ton of new books to sell that year that you didn't have the year before. It isn't necessarily worth it financially to go back every year, and the big conventions are more expensive. I have been hitting, I don't have any on the schedule yet, but I hit a few of the smaller ones over the last year that I had a really great time at. I did Brooklyn Comic Con, it's in June. I think it's in June again next year. Ton of fun, much smaller convention, a lot of local artists and comic book creators. There were actually a lot of comic book creators there, and a few people who are very big on Kickstarter. Concrete Comics was there. They have a very big Kickstarter footprint. Dan Price, who does Bigfoot Knows Karate, he was there. He's great. I met all those guys. I was sitting next to a guy named Will Cooper, who is in Cosi Comics. He was great. I had a lot of fun there, and I did really well financially because there are like a ton of comic book fans were actually there. Ming Chen was there too from Comic Book Men. So that was a lot of fun. I did a smaller convention in Fairfax, Virginia a few months ago. I had a great time on that. It was I think it was just called Fairfax Comic Con.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one. Yeah, and you mentioned Dan Price. Dan Price was here in the studio with us virtually a few weeks ago for And I Quote. So you can always go back and watch that one where he's talking about Bigfoot Knows Karate. Yeah. From Bigfoot Knows Karate to Cicada Samurai. I don't know where people come up with these names, but I got to tell you, I admire the creativity on both Jerry Carita and Dan Price's account.
Thank you. We appreciate that. I'm sure I'll speak for Dan and say we both appreciate that.
Yeah. I like the creativity. That's cool. Yeah, I'm familiar with Fairfax. Haven't been to it, but my aim is to eventually go to that show and have a good time because I've heard some good things about it over the years.
Yeah, it was great, and it's smaller. Like the big. When you go to New York Comic Con, like I know a lot of enormous. And the one I know this past year in San Diego, I know a lot of indie comics people said it was their best year financially at San Diego because the actors went on strike.
Weren't there.
Yes, the actors all went on strike right before the convention. So the cast of the Marvel movies, they weren't allowed to go do promotion. So anyone who was going to Comic-Con to meet Chris Evans and had planned to spend a whole day waiting in line to shake his hand and get Iron Man's autograph or Captain America's autograph, they now have extra money in their pocket and more time to walk the floor. So a lot of comic book people did really well in San Diego, and the New York one, I think that there are still, I think the big studios are going to be there. So, I don't know if that'll be the case, but we're skipping New York this year. I'm hoping to do it next year.
That's fair. But quick shout out to all the people that we do know of who are going to be present up there in the Javits Center of New York for New York Comic Con. My good friend Jeff is going to be there. A number of our vendor friends are going to be there, such as Immortal Art with Pat and Alexis. You also have Herofied Art by Rob Taylor. He's going to have a booth up there. Brian C. Roll of Odyssey Art is going to be in the building, so he's going to be there. So just want to give my friends and our good neighbors up there a quick shout out. We wish you all the best of luck with that weekend. We hope you guys have great numbers, great sales, and support indie artists when you get a chance because they're great people. They're some of the most creative folks in the entire universe. And we've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of them and having them here on what is known as And I Quote, which we're here with the incredible Jerry Carita for this particular episode. And don't forget to like and share this with everyone you know. If you got any questions for Jerry, whether you were joining this live or on the replay, by all means, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. Be more than happy to speak with you. It's cool you bring up those shows. Yeah, because I do feel like in smaller conventions, and I think, the person who may be watching or listening to this can attest to this. If you've been to smaller shows, just want to throw that out there for an example. they're more intimate. You get to know the people a lot better than you do at some of the bigger shows. Now, I personally have never been to NYCC or the WrestleMania, brother, yeah, known as San Diego Comic-Con. I've never been to San Diego. I've never been to the West Coast. I've been to New York, but just not to what is known as the Javits Center, where NYCC is being held each and every single year. So can't comment or speculate, but one of these days, hope to visit New York City Comic-Con and hang out with my friends, because I do have connections up there. I have some good people that table there every year, and it'd be nice to see them again. So
the smaller shows, the big shows are like an event. It's a huge event. They're a lot more expensive to get in and set up, so you really need to know that you're going to do well financially there to really make it worth your while. But it's your best chance at like getting your thing, whatever your thing is, in front of as many eyeballs as possible. But the smaller ones can be a ton of fun. I actually backed a Kickstarter campaign to start a new. They're doing a new convention in New Haven, Connecticut. I think it's called. I want to say it's called Indie Creators Comic Con or Indie Comics Creator Con.
Oh, I like that.
He raised like a few $1,000 on Instagram, and he's going to do a whole convention in like a university on a campus in New Haven that's specifically geared towards comic book creators. So they're not going for the big stars. And I'm really excited to go to that just to buy a ticket and show up and just, have that ability to just meet people and hang out for a bit,
Boy, if I can fit that into my calendar and travel all the way up from North Carolina up to New Haven, Connecticut, that would be nice, because I've never been to Connecticut before. Never been. So I can't comment or speculate, but congratulations on that person who's putting together their own show and supporting indie creators of all kinds, because indie is where it's at. So just thought I'd throw that out there as an example. If you don't mind me asking, though, quick side note here, from what you've seen thus far by watching a lot of these movies, going back and watching some of these movies with your family, what's your son's favorite Star Wars movie? Does he have a favorite of Star Wars or favorite character?
We started with The Mandalorian, so he liked the reason this all started because I was watching The Mandalorian and he walked into the room and was like, "What's this?" And he had a million questions.
Well, this is the way, Jerry. This is the way.
So The Mandalorian is up there. Is one of his. He was the Mandalorian for Halloween last year. This year he wants to be a Cicada Samurai. We don't know how to do that yet. So trying to figure that out.
Good luck with that one, Jerry.
My kids this year want to all do things out of comic books. My son wants to know who's my older one wants something scary. So he's like, what's a scary character in a comic book? My daughter wants to be Anne Bonny. One of the Blue Juice books I work on is called Anne Bonny. And then my youngest wants to be a Cicada Samurai.
What is...
I've got to figure that out.
Yeah, good luck with some of these costumes, my friend.
But the Mandalorian is his favorite Star Wars character.
Hey, nothing, to be perfectly honest with you, man, there's nothing wrong with that. And when you're exposing him to the wide world of Star Wars and you got that show playing in the background, let's face it.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
That's it.
It's all you need. It's all you need. It's perfect. It's beautiful. It's great. Mandalorians, rock on. Look forward to seeing the next season and whatever else they got cooking in what is known as the Star Wars oven. Yeah. Did you catch any of Ahsoka?
Not yet, and I intentionally didn't watch it yet because I never watched the Star Wars cartoons, so I never watched Rebels or Clone Wars in the past. So I'm watching those with him now, and I didn't want to. I know, from watching Mandalorian and then from watching Boba Fett, I know that the Dave Filoni, all those characters from all the animated series are gradually kind of taking over the Mandalorian universe, as I'm calling it, the Mandoverse.
Mandoverse, there you go.
Mandoverse, we'll go with that. Trademark Mandoverse. So I intentionally didn't do Ahsoka yet because I'm watching Ahsoka now as a kid. We just watched her introduction. We're 3 or 4 seasons into Clone Wars, and then we'll do Rebels, and then I'll watch Ahsoka.
Awesome. Sounds like a good idea, because to be perfectly honest with you, I know we're talking a little bit about Star Wars here for just a moment, but if you're not familiar with anything that's happened in the Clone Wars or the animated series known as Rebels, which are both animated series, just so you know, you're not going to understand a gosh darn thing of what's going on in Ahsoka, because I watched all 8 episodes, and there were parts of it where I was still kind of confused. Because granted, I could have done of what is known as a refresher course by going back, binge watching maybe all 4 seasons of Rebels, if not the final season of Rebels, to understand what's going on as it leads into Ahsoka respectively. I just didn't do that because when I watch a show and I enjoy it for what it is, and then I just move on to the next thing. I don't feel like going back. I mean, don't get me wrong. It probably would have helped if I refreshed my memory before going in to see Ahsoka. But at the same time, I just want to see the show for what it is and just enjoy it, just enjoy the ride. And I probably should have done a refresher course because I kept asking my friends who are more steeped in the lore of the War and the Stars a little bit more so than I am, because I've read a lot of the books, because the books do shed some light on what's going on with characters such as Thrawn and Ahsoka and a few of the others that are mentioned in there for good measure. Without going into spoilers here, I'm not trying to spoil this for you here, Jerry, but it's a deep rabbit hole.
I believe it. Like, I love all the references to the old stuff. So like when I saw Rogue One and Saw Gerrera was in it, I was like,
love that movie.
I'd never seen that character though before.
Me neither.
So I went back and I was like, okay, well now I'm gonna have to watch. And then it all came from the Dave Filoni stuff. And then watching Mandalorian, what I loved about Mandalorian is that it wasn't the Skywalker story. It was unrelated.
Fresh.
It was in a galaxy even further and further away from that galaxy is what it felt like.
Yeah, it was fresh.
And it was fresh. It was new. It was like different. It was a different part of the universe. And I liked that. And then they gradually started bringing in these characters that clearly had like a really deep and rich backstory that someone knew, but I didn't. So Bo-Katan and the Darksaber and all these other characters. And I looked them all up online and I'm like, oh, these are all things that were introduced on these other series that I never watched. So, I took a pause. I was like, I'm going to wait. I'm not going to dig too deep into. I loved Ahsoka, her quick appearance in Mandalorian with Luke for a few minutes. Like, I loved all that. I loved all that. I loved getting to see the Mandalorian, even being totally separate. Somehow gave us the Luke Skywalker badass scene that we all didn't get to see in any of the movies. Like,
no one expected that. No one, like anyone who grew up way back when in the 80s, the early 80s, to see these films for the first time in theaters, respectively. And we're talking about Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And then he comes back all these years later that we never thought we would see it. We never thought we would see, well, what happened to these guys after Return of the Jedi? We never saw it. We never, I mean, you can read about it in the books, even though most of it's not canon anymore, according to the, higher ups. But when you look at Return of the Jedi, it's just a big period at the end. You're thinking to yourself, well, what happens next? What are they going to do? Like, what does Luke go on and live happily ever after with a girlfriend or a wife and have kitties roaming around the campfire on Tatooine? Even though I don't like sand. It's coarse, it's rough, it's irritating, and it gets everywhere. But even so, we never thought we would see the day where Luke, after Return of the Jedi, comes back, and we saw that. And the moment you watch these videos online, Jerry, you've probably seen them. People reacting to that scene.
Oh yeah. Oh, as soon as the X-wing. As soon as you see the X-wing.
Yeah, when the people who grew up on the original trilogy, like 50, 60-year-old men and women, are watching these episodes unfold, this moment unfold before their very eyes, and they became a child again.
Yeah. And everything about the setup of it was perfect. The dark, what they call the dark, what were the droids, the dark troopers.
Yeah.
So such a good like monster of a thing.
Like Terminators.
Yes, like a fleet of them. It was amazing. And then as soon as I saw that X-wing, I wish I had a picture of my own face when I was like in my house, with just like as soon as the X-wing pulling in and they're like, it's an X-wing, and I was like, oh, like immediate like holy shit. And it was great. It was so good. And again, it's like they managed to squeeze that into a show that was the whole point of which was to do something Star Wars that was not someone handing something to Princess Leia or something that fit in between existing movies about the characters we already know. I love that about it. And it just started to get introduced so many people that I knew were in these animated series. So I was like, I'm going to stop now. I'm going to go back. I'm going to watch the shows I didn't watch with my son. And then I'll come back to these things. I'll watch the rest of, when they do more Mandalorian, I'll watch that. I'll watch, I'm pausing all of it until I go back and watch it. So.
Well, Lord knows you and your family and you and your loved ones are going to have a lot to binge watch. Oh my God. Like, I mean, Clone Wars is 7, 8 seasons. And then you got Rebels, which is 4 seasons. Like that's a lot of episodes, brother.
It is. We're about halfway through Clone Wars, I think. I think we're at the beginning of season 4.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I actually, for those of you wondering why we keep talking about this thing called the War in the Stars, it's because we like it. So just hang with us for a bit. We're getting to the. I mean, we've had some really great questions here, but I do want to say this though: Star Wars, when it comes to introducing people to the content of Star Wars, you know, someone brought this up on a video that I saw a couple nights ago, and they were saying, "What's a good entry point if someone has never heard the words Star Wars and they want to be introduced to the lore?" And some people have said, well, the first thing you got to do is introduce them to the original trilogy, because that's where it all started. Those three movies are the pillars, right? That's the foundation of everything that you're seeing now. But the other person said, well, if I'm going to introduce somebody to Star Wars through television, you know, and rather than the cinematic landscape, The Mandalorian is a perfect entry point, because it takes place after all the stuff has happened. It's its own little thing, especially within season 1, because it's introducing this new character. You know, granted, it comes from a race that's been introduced in other movies, yes, but it's fresh. It's a new character with new stories, new environments, new things to be. And also, we get to learn about the criminal underworld of Star Wars, which we don't really get a whole lot of. And that's something I want to see explored even more. I want to see the wretched hive of scum and villainy. Yeah. I want to see more of the darkness, brother. I want to see it.
I have a very controversial opinion about the most recent movie trilogy, and we don't need to get too far into this because it's another deep rabbit hole. But the three movies that J.J. Abrams EP'd
and Rian Johnson, yeah,
my favorite one is The Last Jedi.
That's not going to cause a stir in the comments.
I'm alone. I know I'm alone. But it's my favorite one, not because it was necessarily the best one, the best written or directed, or the best whatever. I enjoyed a lot of it, but because it tried to break more. I've been living with the Star Wars that I've known, with these characters that I've known since before I was born. The first movie came out 3 years before I was born. So I grew up watching those movies with my mother. I was among the people who was really angry about the prequels. I like to pretend they don't exist. It's impossible now, because if you want to watch the Dave Filoni stuff, you have to know the prequels. So, you know, with my son, I did it chronologically by timeline. So we didn't do Rogue One, because to me that's more of a war movie, and he was only 6 when we started this. So I didn't want to subject him to that. So we started with episode 1, and we went through episode 9. We did Han Solo in the middle there.
The Solo Star Wars story movie, yeah,
exactly. But we didn't do Rogue One, and then so we'll go back and do that at some point. But yeah, I like the Rian Johnson thing because it was weird, because they did things like they had that kid at the end who could move the broom with the Force. It was people who weren't directly related to Luke Skywalker also had access to the Force. Like, you get the sense that it's going to live with or without these people, you know. And I kind of like that. I like that that moment where Kylo Ren looks at Rey and just goes, "You're not even part of the story. Your parents are nobody. You're nothing." Like, chills. I still, right now, talking about it, get like goosebumps. Love that scene. Love it. And the fact that they pretended that it was just a lie that was made up in the next movie drives me crazy. That was my favorite scene in any of those movies, was that moment of like, you don't have to secretly be, you know, Leia's long lost daughter or Luke's niece or whatever to have these powers. It supersedes that. And I love that. So, you know, it's a weird opinion, because there's a lot about that movie that I also didn't like, but it's my favorite one. And my starting point with my kid was we did it chronologically with episode 1, because I was just like, he's 7. I didn't necessarily want to have to make sure he understood the idea of a prequel and like going back and forth in directions. But if you were starting as an adult, I would say start with A New Hope. It's a great movie, and in like The DeLorean, it's basically a you know, it's an old Western movie turned into a Star Wars, a sci-fi story. That's a great story, though.
No, I would agree with that. I was just, you know, someone brought it up on the interwebs. I thought I'd just share it with you who may be watching or listening to this. If someone's looking for an entry point into Star Wars, obviously the best thing to do is go back and watch the original trilogy. It's all there. You can watch it on Disney Plus. # not a sponsor. Just want to make that perfectly clear. No one's paying any of us to say that. I'm just saying. And listen, I'll be perfectly honest with you here, Jerry. I've watched New Hope more times than I can count, because I love it so much. And it's. I mean, I can quote. I mean, we could. You know, and this is another thing. we're doing a new show that's coming up here very soon. And to stay here, we're going to keep this on track for And I Quote. But just as a side note, we're doing a new show called The Nerdy Cantina, where it's going to be myself and our good friends Christy and Jen are going to be co-hosting with us. And we're going to be pulling cards out of a deck called the Chat Pack of Star Wars, which have 125 conversation cards that have different questions relating to the Star Wars galaxy in some way, shape, or form, presented by Insight Editions. And the link is already up for that show. It's going to be tomorrow night, actually, Tuesday night, believe it or not, at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for those of you wondering. The links are on our social media, which you can find on Facebook and YouTube and all that kind of jazz. So, Jerry, I have a feeling you may want to step into that cantina, because I have a feeling you're going to stir the pot, and you're definitely going to give our viewers and our listeners something to talk about. So
if you guys bring guests on, I'd love to join.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Let me know when, buddy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, we're going to invite people to join in on the Nerdy Cantina here very soon. Don't get me wrong. But Jerry, I have a feeling about you. I have this forced sense something's going to happen. You just don't know the power of the dark side. Anyway, I'm just kidding you, pal. I'm just kidding you. But once again, this is And I Quote, for those of you wondering what the bantha fodder is going on. Speaking of Star Wars references, there's another one. Jerry Carita is here with us. We've been talking about what is known as Cicada Samurai. There's a title that's going to keep you up at night. And if you want to ask him any questions, whether you're joining this live or on the replay, by all means, let us know in the comments, let us know in the chat. I'm more than happy to take those from you. Jerry, this has been a great discussion about Star Wars and some other pieces of media that you and I have had a chance to what is known as chime in about. But I do want to let you know something special here, and that is this episode of And I Quote, and every episode of And I Quote, is indeed powered by our good friends here at Poddex. Now, check this out. Poddex are what is known as unique interview questions and episode starting prompts in the palm of your own hand. So whether you're a new podcaster, or should I say existing broadcaster, looking to grow your audience or get more engagement, you're going to want to check out our friends over there at poddex.com. Use that code RYAN10. That's RYAN10. RYAN10 for 10% off your first order. So Poddex wants to know, if everything in your house had to be one color, what color would you choose, Jerry?
It's so hard. Oh my god, because all the kids, it's like, what do you do? Green, like a dark green, like an olive green.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard. It's so like the color of your shirt, like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This is like a Kelly. I wouldn't say it's Kelly green, but it's more of a dark green.
Yeah, like a dark green, dark green.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard because like.
Okay.
My kids make everything filthy, so you can't pick a light color. You know what I mean? Like,
what do you
do? I have a dog.
Oh, you have a dog too?
Yeah, I can't like.
I don't know how I got to be honest with you, brother. I don't know how you do it, but listen, just so you're wondering, this is a shirt for the series known as Snowpaw from the indie label known as Lone Wolf Comics, which is presented by Rob Multeri of Lone Wolf Comics. So if you're interested in werewolves and vampires and other monsters, and you know what they say, right, Jerry? Things that go bump in the night.
That was a big Kickstarter campaign too, right? I know those guys.
You know Lone Wolf Comics and Rob Multeri of LoneWolfComics.com?
I do know of it. Yeah, I'm on. Rob Multeri. Yeah. There was a Kickstarter for it. I think I supported it.
You did? Well, hey, you know what they say, right? You know what they say, right? Small world.
Did you say that?
Yeah, he does the series called Night Wolf, and he also does Snowpaw. But this is Snowpaw, by the way. This is the spin-off series of his main storyline, which is called Night Wolf. So if you're into things known as lycanthropy, which is another way of saying wolves, werewolves, demons, monsters, things that go bump in the night, and that's your story. Hey, listen, it's spooky season. So why don't you hashtag treat yourself and check out our friends at lonewolfcomics.com and treat yourself to some comics, because if Jerry Carita supports it, it's got to be good. So there you go. I'm just throwing that out there as an example. And by the way, hi, Rob Multeri of Lone Wolf Comics. Hope everything's going well for you in your neck of the woods. And we wish you and the creative team at lonewolfcomics.com the best of luck with what is known as Night Wolf and the spinoff series, which, by the way, Snowpaw is really good. Check out Snowpaw at lonewolfcomics.com. But Poddex wants to know, in the meantime, outside of our massive amount of support for something known as lonewolfcomics.com, how much would someone have to pay for your little toe? Could be any amount of money.
Yeah, I'm really into my little toe though.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do with some money, but I'm really into my toe.
Okay.
At least like 40 something thousand dollars.
Okay. It's a good round number.
At least.
Okay. All right. So just for those of you wondering how much would it cost for that, just write down the numbers 40,000. It's $40,000. So with that being said, if hypothetically you were stranded on a deserted island and you could choose one person to keep you company, who would it be?
Living or dead?
Yeah, we can go with that.
You
can play with this question as much as you want. It's free reign.
It's free reign. One
living
person
or
to
dead?
keep me company. I would go with. I have this friend, Paul Mazza, who is the craziest person I know. It's just such a terrible answer to this because nobody on this knows who this is. My friend Paul is one of the craziest people I know, and whenever I spend time with him, like we'll fall into a rabbit hole that just is hours and hours of talking about something that at the end of which I'm like, I can't believe how much time has gone by. So I think that's who I would pick because it would just pass the time seamlessly stuck on that island. So my buddy Paul Mazza, I'm sorry that it's like an answer that no one else can relate to.
It's okay. It's everything here is fair game. And the follow-up question to that is, if you were stranded on a deserted island, what about one animal to keep you company?
My dog Lola. My dog who actually passed a while ago, Lola.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Sorry for your loss. But it's interesting you bring up the name Lola, because when I think of that name, I think of the scene where my next door neighbor, also known as Kramer, walks in and he says, "It's over." "What's over?" "Me and Lola." "Well, what do you mean? She dumped me." "She dumped you?" "She dumped me. She ran right over me." Says I was a hipster doofus. Am I a hipster doofus? No. Says I'm not good looking enough for her. Not good looking. Jeremy, look at me. Look at my face, huh? Am I beautiful? George, am I beautiful? You're very attractive. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's from a sitcom that I've watched way too many times, Jerry.
Way too many times. That's not even like one of the quotable lines from that series. Like,
no, it's
that
not.
You went deep. That's pretty good. I'm impressed and scared. I'm both things.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm not used to hearing both responses at the same time, Jerry. But I will say this though. My brother, I have two older brothers, so they introduced me to that series when it was originally on way back when. But granted, I didn't get into it till towards the end of its run, respectively, which was like the end of season 7, the beginning of season 8 before it went off the air. And then this little invention came out a couple years later called Divida. And we ended up buying the Dividas of those series. Now, granted, I only bought seasons 3 through 9 for myself, and my brother bought all 9 seasons because he's a fan of the entire thing. And I said, "Brother, the first the first 2, if not 3 seasons are weak sauce compared to seasons 4 through 9. But that's just the way I felt about it.
Right.
So I have most of the series on Divida. So if I ever want to go back and watch it, I have access to that. So there you go. And if you don't know what we're talking about, it's called Seinfeld. Funny, one of the funniest sitcoms of all time. Jerry, do you have a favorite episode of that or no?
I really enjoy watching, like, honestly, I like watching pilots for old shows. So it's again a weird opinion. Yeah, I just like watching the first episode. So I love the pilot of that show because it's so they're never good. They're almost never as good as the series becomes later. And I always like watching. I recently rewatched the Next Generation's pilot, and it's super weird. It's super weird watching.
Encounter at Farpoint with Q. Yeah.
Yes. Like the fact that Q is already, we don't know any of these characters, and the first alien they encounter is someone who messes with reality as we know it. We don't even know the reality yet. Super weird. And Picard is just kind of a jerk for no reason. He's just a grumpy, weird jerk of a character for the first 3 or 4 episodes, and then he like becomes Captain Picard, who we love. Did I say Kirk? I said Kirk, didn't I?
No. You said Picard.
I said Picard. Okay, I thought I said Kirk.
No. I believe you said Picard. So, in the words of Picard, engage, make it so.
Yeah. But it's super weird.
Would you like something to drink? Tea, Earl Grey.
Earl Grey. That's it. But the pilot for Seinfeld is a weird thing to watch now. It's like a little jilted. The characters are not quite who they are. Yeah. It's so weird.
And then what the first conversation was, right? They're sitting in the cafe, and Jerry says, "To me, that button is in the worst possible spot."
Yeah.
Look at that. The second button. He says the second button is the key button. Look at it.
Yeah.
It's doing nothing for you. It's in no man's land.
They did a ton more stand-up comedy bits in the show.
Oh,
You know,
as
that
it
was
progressed,
much heavier, yeah. And then one show I will say that the pilot is like stellar, and it's the show firing on all cylinders right away. Cheers.
You know,
Like old sitcoms.
I finally started watching Cheers because I actually one of my family members bought me the first 6 seasons as a DVD set, and I watched the early. I've watched the first 2 going on 3 seasons, and I got to tell you, I agree with you. That pilot's pretty darn good. Like, it sets up the whole dynamic, like a good dynamic between, okay, this is a guy who owns a bar and he's got all these different regulars that come in and express themselves in their own unique, strange sort of, like Norm always sits at the end of the bar, Cliff sits at the opposite end, and then eventually he ended up sitting next to Norm. And later, I think in like the second or third season, he started sitting next to Norm a little bit more because he got tired of, I guess, being by him, because he's the mailman. Like, what's he gonna do? Like, but he has these weird words of wisdom, like, what was it, Diane Chambers, right? Diane says, what's the point of drinking beer on a hot day? Well, the British setters, the balance the outside temperatures, so conversely gives you a warmer body temperature.
Yep.
Why drink so-and-so on a hot day? What else are you going to do with it? Anyway, sorry, I just got to know from my producers here. So real quick, is a hot dog a sandwich? And if so, why?
A hot dog is absolutely not a sandwich because it's a hot dog. It's different.
Gotcha. If you could look through one person's email without them knowing, whose email would you look through? This could be anybody.
Zack Snyder.
Ooh.
I want to get to the bottom of it all. I want to know how much people told him about whether they liked his thing or not. I just want to know what happened. I want to know it all from the horse's collective mouths.
Right. You want to hear from the horse's directly from the horse's mouth is what our good friend Jerry is trying to get at. Well, Jerry, I want to say thank you for being here on this really, and I got to say, this was a very stellar and educational episode of And I Quote. We learned a lot about you, kind sir, but we thank you for being here. Where can the individual who is watching or listening follow you on social media?
I am mainly on Instagram, but I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook, all as Thorny Comics. Thorny like a rose has a thorn. Thorny Comics on Facebook. I'm at Thorny Comics on Instagram and Twitter. And my Kickstarter is live right now. If you go to Kickstarter and just look for, I guess maybe it'll be in the comments in the description below. But if it's not, go to Kickstarter and look up the word cicada, and it's the first thing that pops up. Cicada Samurai. The campaign ends this Friday night at midnight.
Jerry, thank you so much for being with us. Yes, indeed. All the links to where you can follow him are located within the description below. Feel free to follow me and the insanity that ensues, if you will, on Twitter and Instagram at RyanRPM5. Also, check out all the incredible stuff we're doing, such as the Nerdy Cantina. It's going to drop on Tuesday night, October the 10th at 8. Is it 8 p.m.? Yeah, 8 p.m. I believe it's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My gosh, there's so many things going on in my mind. Also, we're this close to hitting 1,000 subscribers. Once we do, we're going through a great big live stream celebration that's going to include returning favorites, some surprise guests, and some special giveaways for you, our incredible viewers / subscribers, such as these prints from the Art of John Pinto on Instagram and Facebook. Look at this. Ooh la la. Look at that bad boy. We were talking about Star Trek. Now, this is Captain Pike from the hit series Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Try saying that 20 times fast. Also, if you're a fan of someone jumping into a phone booth and going backwards and forwards in time, look at that. Doctor Who. Yeah, Doctor Who. There's another one right there. And then we were talking about this property earlier between Jerry and I. Look at this one. Yeah. Guy who carries a red lightsaber. I wonder who that could be. Darth Vader. So if you want to win these things, you got to tell your friends about us, because you're going to tell their friends and they tell their friends and so on and so on. You know how these things go. Also, The Meaning of Fandom has dropped, so check it out on the Meaning of Fandom playlist on our YouTube channel. And speaking of X-Men, Jerry, the composer of the iconic theme song of the 90s animated series and Power Rangers and more, Ron Wasserman, the man himself, the composer, is going to be with us on a very special episode of And I Quote Saturday, October the 14th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. All our videos are going to be there, so definitely check him out and ask him questions because Ron Wasserman is a legend. He's a legend. Speaking of X-Men, there you go, Jerry. I'm doing it again. So check out all that stuff. Support what Jerry's doing and all our other guests. You can find previous episodes on the And I Quote with Ryan Permison playlist on our YouTube channel. In the meantime, like, comment, share, subscribe, ring that bell to be notified when videos go up or they go live. And remember, life is better when reading and indie supports indie. Take a look.
Famous Faces and Funnies in Melbourne, Florida is leading the way in pop culture fun. From comic books and graphic novels to Funko Pops and collector's items, Famous Faces and Funnies has it all. Rick Shea and the professional team at Famous Faces and Funnies are friendly and knowledgeable. Whether you're looking for toys, props, collector treasures, or a new comic book, Famous Faces and Funnies is your one-stop shop. To find Famous Faces and Funnies on Facebook and Twitter, just type at FFF Comics.
Sweet dreams they placed on me inside my mind. Chance my truth, twist the past, my memories are fading fast. Am I still missed? Who do you want me to be? Am I still missed?
You've worked hard and written a great book. Now, it's time to give it a great cover. If you're an indie author or small press publisher, Plasma Fire Graphics is your source for affordable cover illustration and graphic design. Plasma Fire Graphics, when the look of your book matters to you.
Good morning! Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.